Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. The Andor trailer is finally here. I have not watched anything about it. I'm gonna fully react to this trailer for the first time, and please stay tuned for the afterwards where I will discuss what I expect to see from the show. Anyway, I'm pretty excited, have no clue what's gonna happen. Let's jump right into it, guys. I have my video queued up. Let's do this. And 1, 2, let's go. Hit me, Andor. Braveheart vibes here. Ooh, I like this gun. Nice. I like the very gritty kind of like color scheme. Very much like World War II cinema.
You just walk in like you belong.
That's young Andor.
They're so proud of themselves.
The Senate.
So fat and satisfied. They can't imagine that someone like me would ever get inside their house.
Cassian Andor. The Empire is choking us so
I'm enjoying
slowly.
the music here, really nice, very
We're
dramatic.
starting not to notice. What I'm asking is this. Wouldn't you rather give it all to something real?
The Andor is looking pretty badass, man. I like that.
I need all the heroes I can get.
For the greater good.
Call it what you will.
Let's call it.
Oh shit, Saw Gerrera. Nice.
There's fermenting out there, son. Pockets of fermenting.
First cells of rebellion. That's what I was
You're
expecting.
in my net. Are you a fish? Or are you a thief?
You're slipping.
Cassian is gonna have some
I'm
love
not
interest.
sleeping. I've just been hiding for too long.
Yes, space battle. Please, can we get more of them?
As long as everyone
Please.
thinks I'm an irritation,
Mon Mothma.
there's a good chance they'll miss what I'm really doing.
What are you really doing?
This is what revolution looks like.
I'm tired of losing.
Oh, it's badass. All right. Okay. This definitely warrants a second watch. I'm not gonna do it right now, guys, but all of my talking points, I like scribbled down little notes for myself, what I'm gonna talk about next, reacting to this trailer first and then what I expect to see from this show. It pretty much nailed every single aspect of the things I wanted to talk about prior to seeing this trailer. And now that I'm actually finally seeing it, excuse me for a second, guys, pretty sweaty in here. Yeah, it's like I'm looking at this trailer, like, you are reading my mind. It's almost like Rogue One deja vu. Before we saw the official trailer for Rogue One, it was sort of kind of, at least in my circle of friends, the sort of movie that nobody expected or wanted. Like, really? We're gonna get to see how a bunch of, like, rebels just stole a death plans? No known actors? Like, what's going on here? The moment you saw the trailer, we all suddenly realized it's the movie we didn't necessarily ask for, but everybody suddenly wanted to see it. Everybody jumped on board. I think of all the Disney era movies that I took all of my friends to see, Rogue One was the one that hit the spot the most. All of my friends who are like casual Star Wars fans, who are not even into Star Wars, just enjoy adventure, like kind of like blockbuster movies in general, they all unanimously loved Rogue One. Cassian over here has a lot of vibes there. So what I'm gathering from this trailer is, once again, they're investing a lot of money into it. We're finally going beyond the scope of just like on the ground kind of like planetary stuff, because what we see in Mandalorian, there are a couple of space scenes here and there, sprinkled, let's be fair, but majority of adventuring, majority of action is happening ground side, right? Here we're seeing, okay, this is a full-on rebellion. And of course, Star Wars being a vastly open galaxy of storytelling and narrative and things happening on different planets and different sectors there, how are you going to mount a rebellion versus this vast empire? You got to fight on the ground and you got to fight in space. And that's what it's tackling. And I was very happy to see that the trailer also emphasized Mon Mothma, because it's a twofold battle, right? You don't only fight by inspiring the hearts and minds of all the people who are sick and tired of all this empire, you also go and tackle this issue in the political arena, right? Mon Mothma, she tries to perhaps rally influential people who still have some influence, and they maybe try sway the emperor or some of his bills, some of the things that he tries to outlaw and ban and stuff like that. So from the perspective of the trailer itself, I am honestly very excited. I'm looking forward to it. I still hope, like the last experience that I had with Star Wars Kenobi show, for those of you guys who saw my reviews, I wasn't quite thrilled with it. I felt like so far Star Wars live action shows they've reached their highest peak with actually their first show, Mandalorian, and from that point forward, they kind of been sliding down. Boba Fett was like cool, I had some fun with it. Even with Kenobi, I had pleasant moments, some interesting stuff going there. Obviously, everybody was happy to see Qui-Gon Jinn, but I expected more. I wanted that show not to be just average or decent. I want something truly special, when we can turn our eyes back to Star Wars and feel, oh my God, this is really amazing. Anyway, trailer out of the side. Now let's talk about what do I expect to see from the show. What do I think it needs to accomplish in order to be a major success, stand out, and have people talk about Star Wars in a completely different light then. Not that like, I disagree and you agree and people sharing different thoughts and opinions. When something truly special comes out, like the latest Batman movie, I mean, it's almost unanimous. I'm not saying there are people who disliked it for maybe valid reasons, but from the standpoint of artistry and filmmaking and the goals that movie was set out to do and how it accomplished them, unanimously, people all around the world like, oh yeah, this is pretty amazing. Or even a couple of years prior to that, when Logan movie came out, right? We see Wolverine Unleashed, and we had a truly dramatic and amazing piece of cinema sold to us as an action film, through all these high thrills kind of like trailers. But when you actually saw the movie, there's so much grit and human emotion and storytelling involved. It just blew everybody away. People had nothing but positive things to say about it because it was it's that special. It reaches that high mark that everybody just appraises it. That's what I hope for Star Wars, and being a diehard fan for my entire life, I'm still hopeful, even though there are a couple of things that I dislike. My friends, my boys at Star Wars on High and Star Wars Complete, those guys, they're checking it out, they're enjoying it, they're hollering to me, hey Ben, how come you didn't like Kenobi? We enjoyed it. So it's still good, it's still entertaining. Anyway, back to Andor. What do I think the show needs? I think it needs consistency, I think it needs dramatic tension, and I think it needs stylistic integrity. Let's go over each one and every one of them, and I'll give you a couple of examples and explain just what I mean. So what I mean by consistency, I would like to see a greater overarching theme and perhaps smaller subplots or sub-stories that help build it, that they all go into this one vast river of storytelling. For example, it's an Andor show, and obviously what we gather from Rogue One, we need to have some espionage, right? He is this kind of guy. He's a soldier. He's undercover. He goes out there. He taps into sources that he needs to get all the information, and eventually it's all going to lead up to their ultimate goal, ultimate victory of stealing the Death Star plans. Also, we're obviously going to have Mon Mothma and her battle in the political arena. And of course, I'm hoping to see other important figures like perhaps Bail Organa mounting the first rebel cells. It would totally be remiss of them not to include Bail Organa, because we've seen him in Kenobi and he was sort of tied into the story because of Leia, because they were trying to raise her, and when she's kidnapped, it sort of like jump starts Kenobi into the action. He was reluctant before, and then he had to go in and fight for them. Same here. Bail Organa would be absolutely instrumental because he is the leader. He is one of these guys who not only inspired the rebellion, but also Leia, who will become the heart and soul of the rebels. So when you're dealing with seemingly three separate major figures here, you got Andor on one side, then you got Mon Mothma, and then potentially another prominent figure like Bail Organa. I'm just assuming at this point, guys. You could still have all of these parallel stories happening, but they need to be consistent in what the show is trying to tell. What happened before with Star Wars live action shows felt a little bit messy, a little bit not well organized. And I'll just give you a couple examples where I felt like the shows were diverting and taking our attention someplace else. And I feel that it's just not very constructive for Star Wars storytelling or storytelling in general. For example, in Mandalorian, season 2, episode 2, the Spiders episode, we're still dealing primarily with our lead character, right, Din Djarin, and he still has Grogu with him. But literally, that entire episode was like a video game fetch quest. Conveniently, the ship had to break, it had to crash land on this planet, so we get to see some exciting spiders in a spider cave running around, and then Grogu picks up a little egg, and he just gobbles an egg, and everybody laughs. How that contributed to the overall story, I don't know. I didn't see a lot of bonding between Grogu and Din Djarin. I didn't see a moment of tension where they get to grow together. Something that would lead us back to the overall story. What is a Mandalorian show trying to tell us? So I would love to see a show that doesn't have those filler episodes, that strictly focuses on the story it needs to tell. And that obviously could go beyond Cassian Andor and just focusing on him. Because obviously it's the title of the show, it's all about him, but it's also all about the rebellion and all of these figures involved. Jyn Erso was there in the Rogue One. She was also a huge part of it. So let's see how they handle it. Once again, just to give you another example, in Boba Fett show, right, when we see Luke Skywalker and Mandalorian Din Djarin back, right, I think it was episodes 5 and 6, that completely overshadowed the Book of Boba Fett show, and jokingly, all of us started calling that show basically Mandalorian 2.5, because suddenly the gears come to a full stop on Boba Fett. It's his show, let's not forget, right? And then we go to Din Djarin and his little quest. He gets his own little Naboo fighter ship. And then he goes completely off planet and he goes to fetch Grogu. And then Luke Skywalker is again involved. How does that work into the whole Boba Fett story? That's beyond me, guys. But I don't want to see stuff like that. I want to see a show that is consistent. It knows what it's doing. And it continuously conveys that feeling. The next thing I want to talk about is dramatic tension. I would like them to really focus on the characters and flesh out all the heroes, all the villains, and to a point where the audience is really invested in them and we really care. If it's a hero that we're worried that something is going to happen to them or they might die, or if it's a villain that we're really afraid of them, it's, oh my God, every time they show up on the screen, we're just terrified. I'm pretty obvious Vader is going to be in the show. Again, I would be surprised if he's not. I want them to portray them in such a way that we're like, oh my man, we're all scared of him. Because once again, returning to stuff like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Indira Verma, a tremendous, amazing, fabulous actress, I felt that she was just swept under the rug. She barely shows up in the show. She helps Kenobi hide once. And then in the episode where, full spoiler, guys, if you haven't seen that show, full spoiler, it's a little bit late, but I'm telling you, her character dies off. It was so convenient and so mandatory because the episode needed to have some sort of stakes because nobody else is harmed in that episode. She dies. And once again, I didn't care. By the time the Kenobi show was over, I don't even remember Indira Verma's character's name. So I think it's very essential when you're telling a story, before we get to the high thrills, before we get to action, before all the crazy stuff starts unraveling on the screen, I think it's very important to set up their dramatic tension. To emphasize characters, what they stand for, what they think of, what their philosophies are. And I'm not saying you got to go like Lord of the Rings, Tolkien style, where you dedicate like 200 pages per character. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying within the context of the show, give us enough so we care about this character, so we know what their motivations are, we know what they fight for. For example, when you're doing a piece of dialogue, and you have a really powerfully written character who acts and talks that it makes sense to them. They reply in a particular way or they react in a particular way. All of that stuff builds character. And even when you get to the action sequences, when you think your action through and your particular actor or character is doing something very specifically to what they are, that also builds character. Remember the beginning of Rogue One? When Cassian Andor, he's trying to gather this information from one of his agents or cohorts, whoever that guy was, who was clearly also a good guy, right? And then he's wounded, he starts panicking, he seems like he would flop the entire mission. What does Cassian Andor do? He shoots the freaking guy in the back. That was a big, surprising moment and a big tell to me that it's going to be a character-focused movie that kind of plays into each one of them and makes them different. Cassian Andor is not necessarily the most likable guy. When he's holding the main protagonist character's father, in his bullseye and his aim, and he's about to kill Jyn Erso's father, he's not necessarily a great guy. but he's doing what he needs to do for the rebel cause. And that's strong character to me. That's what I'd like to see continued in the show. And the last thing, before I move on to the last thing, some of the examples that I also wanted to bring were, for example, the Inquisitors in the Obi-Wan Kenobi. I felt they just weren't given enough space to shine. They honestly didn't do anything besides Reva, and even her role was very minuscule. The rest of them were really just like gesturing, parading in front of the screen and swaggering about. And I was like, oh, you know, we're Inquisitors, we're bad. And even Grand Inquisitor, all he was there for is stand behind Darth Vader's shoulder and deliver epic lines. Like, oh, we tricked you. You know, we used your anger against you. But what are you doing here? You know, what are you accomplishing for the show? What is your part of the story here in the show? It didn't do anything for me. Again, I would love to see something dramatic tension built around characters. So when we get the excitement, we get to the action, we really care for our heroes. And the last thing that I wanted to bring here is that I would like to see some stylistic integrity. Again, what do I mean by that? I want something that is different in cinematic tone, that stands out from the rest of the shows that Disney Plus has produced so far. Different from Mandalorian, different from the Book of Boba Fett. Boba Fett was the nearest to Mandalorian. And then when Obi-Wan Kenobi show came out, I felt like the first 2 episodes were a standout. They looked a little bit different. But then for some reason, it just fell into that same routine feel and look with Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. So I would say that between 3 shows, stylistically, they're not very distinguishable one from the other. You might as well have had one good anthologies live action show and all of these episodes combined together. I would not be surprised. So again, I wanted to look and feel very different. For example, what I think would make it stand out from the obvious things like the camera work, you know, and the color palette, you know, how Matrix had stylistically greenish kind of like tint throughout the movie, or Aliens film for James Cameron. It had that distinct signature bluish tint, same with Terminator 2. So from that visual standpoint, those kind of obvious things, you guys could tell apart, for example, you know, the Pirates of the Caribbean from the movie I mentioned earlier when I was watching the trailer, Braveheart, right? They look visually completely different. Different photography, different camera work, different color palettes, and so forth. But also what I mean by that is the context of the show and how it's presented. For example, you're now dealing with the show where it seems like it's a bit more of a mature theme, right? We're dealing with espionage, we're dealing with politics and so forth. So one thing that you could distinguish the show from the rest is espionage and dialogue. I don't think they should shy away from that sort of thing and just focus on all the action and exciting parts or adventuring parts. Have us as the audience sit down and, you know, bring us down, you know, to the ground and focus a couple of scenes where it's all about figuring out the next your spy network, you know, who are the kind of sources or channels you're going to tap into, you know, and the dialogue reflects it. And, you know, a couple of adults in the room are kind of like sweating over some kind of like galactic map. And it's like, okay, this is the next target we should hit. You know, what are you going to bring to the table? We need to mount some resources from there or gather some people. We need to assemble a team, sort of like they do in Rogue One. So you understand what I'm saying? You could do it in terms of dialogue, where you're not so much fixated on the getting to the next part, getting to the adventurous thing, or ship is exploding suddenly, but conversation-heavy, context-heavy show which separates itself from the rest. Also, I think what they need to do here is, once again, because we're dealing with rebellion, which I believe should be fought on all fronts, you could also set aside the show by portraying that very same rebellion with mass-scale battles. From what we've seen so far, there were some decent moments. Once again, I want to return to The Mandalorian, especially season 2. There are some pretty epic moments there, but not big enough for Star Wars. Even when we see in Obi-Wan Kenobi, right, those final episode where Reva finally arrives, there's just a bunch of stormtroopers standing in the back at point blank trying to blast away the door. That just didn't feel epic enough. It felt like a small, tiny operation. I think what needs to happen in Andor, you bring a lot of extras. If you can't have too many extras on screen, you could once again substitute them with some cool digital effects where you basically replicate the same group of actors and put them all over the screen and just make it feel more massive. It needs to feel massive on the ground, but it also needs to feel massive in space. Guys, I want to emphasize that. I want to see epic space battles in the show. It's something that we've been missing in the Star Wars trilogy. For those of you, once again, guys, who follow my channel, know that I'm generally a fan of Star Wars sequels. But one thing that is sorely missing from it is epic, memorable, well-structured space battles. I mean, when we see the first attack on the original Death Star, it literally feels like World War II live footage. Why? Because that's what it was based off. It is so kinetic and so realistic, and all of the space jocks, the space pilots, all of their jargons and all of the military jargon that they use and tactics that they employ, it is so mature and so gritty. Oh man, I just can't express in how many ways it was just badass. Compare that to The Force Awakens and the attack on the Starkiller base. It felt like a video game on the loop. It's just like, you know, I am Poe Dameron, I'm the most badass, you know, pilot. I'm gonna go in the same trench. But there's no sense of strategizing or tactics. It just felt very bare bones. So in Cassian Andor, in this show, I would like to see a well thought out kind of space battles. Who would be their possible source of inspiration? I don't know. Michael Stackpole. His amazing X-Wing series. You know, he wrote the first 6 books of that. That's your prime example. This is how you put forth amazing space battles, because first and foremost, you focus on the characters, you focus on the pilots, what they're trying to accomplish, what their mission is, what they fight for, and what they're willing to die for. And then when you put them in those cockpits and those X-Wings or what have you, and you shoot them off into space, and you have them interact in the same manner that they did on the ground, using, you know, military tactics and employing different strategies, and the Empire is trying to outsmart them or outwit them or divide them or break them apart. Just the first thing that comes to mind is the battle in the Return of the Jedi, right? When the Imperials are commanded by the Emperor, not to necessarily destroy the rebels, but to just block them away, because that's one of the psychological pressures to build there, just so the Emperor could point them out through the screen and show Luke Skywalker, look, the rebellion is dying. We're going to destroy them all. You're now mine like your father. So that's what I want to see from the show. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this trailer. Are you looking forward to the show? And what do you hope to see from it? Thanks a lot for checking me out. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll check you guys next time. Take care, everyone.